Hey up, it's Steve from that old Yorkshire geek and a bit more Star Trek news today. Simon Pegg thinks Star Trek 4 may happen. Star Trek 4 as in from the JJ Universe Star Trek films, which began with Star Trek 2009. Then we had the terrible, well they're all terrible in certain ways, but then we had the absolutely diabolically awful Star Trek Into Darkness. I nearly forgot the name of it then, I hate it that much. And then the trilogy, in quotes, ended with Star Trek Beyond, which wasn't too bad, although there were bits in it that were proper eye-rolling stuff and all that. Not a perfect film by any means, but it's easily, in my opinion, the best of the JJ films, even if best is having to chop a leg off to save an arm or something. Anyway, but before we get into all this, don't forget to like and subscribe, share the videos, drop a comment, hit the notification bell if you're subscribed already. Explore the description for links for stuff like merch and my books and other websites, my social medias and things, and my other channel. Become a member and then you get early access videos and exclusive videos and the other things that membership gets for you. I can't remember, I've forgotten. Emojis in the chat, things like that. I can't blooming remember. But it all helps and it is greatly appreciated if you do become a member. We'll get on with it, shall we? We shall get on with it right after this quick intro. Right, that's that done with. I don't know. I'm experimenting to see, if I get more views if I don't have an intro at the beginning. I've heard viewers prefer, a cold open. I don't know, but whatever. Right, let's have a look at this article. It's from Slash Film, not Italic Eye Film, as I used to think it was. There it is. Simon Pegg thinks Star Trek 4 may still happen, but there's only one way to make it work, as in make it good and don't have it in the JJ universe. Have them transition into the proper Star Trek universe. And I don't mean the Kurtzman verse either. Anyway, this is from Whitney Seibold, and there is Simon Pegg. This is from Star Trek Beyond, isn't it? There he is. What's he got his thumb up for? Don't know. It looks like he's talking into his communicator, but with his thumb up. Is it an aerial? What's he got a ring there for? What's that ring for? I don't know. Anyway. Right, the last theatrically released Star Trek movie, Justin Lin's Star Trek Beyond, was released way back in July of 2016, more than 9 years ago, if you're reading this in 2025. It was the third film in the rebooted Kelvin continuity, which featured a hip, hot new cast playing familiar characters from the original Star Trek series. It was successful. In a manner of speaking. It made over $343 million on a $185 million budget, which means it wasn't successful. Technically, it lost money. You've essentially got to make 3 times your production budget, which it didn't. It didn't even double it, did it? It should have made like $370 million. Even that wouldn't have been enough, because you've got to account for the studio doesn't, recoup all the money from ticket sales, and then there's marketing costs to go on, which is, at least usually the rule of thumb is that the marketing is usually equal to the budget or thereabouts. But anyway, but those numbers were considered a disappointment because it was because they lost money. The future of Star Trek movies was thrown into flux. The following year, Star Trek Discovery debuted on CBS All Access. Remember that? Remember that, it didn't last long, did it? Marking the return of Star Trek to TV for the first time in 12 years, and a proud return to the original, put that in quotes, original non-Kelvin continuity, even though it was completely different, and it still is to this day. Star Trek Discovery, notoriously terrible, although I did enjoy season 1 of Star Trek Discovery, I've got to admit, because it was different, and in my mind I was thinking, this is a different Star Trek. In my mind it was never in the original series continuity, the Berman era, the Roddenberry era, etc. I always thought of it as something different, so I cut it a lot of slack, but even with that, even cutting slack, it just got terrible and it was awful after season 1. And some say season 1 were awful, which it was in many ways, but I still kind of enjoyed it because it were different and I didn't know what was going to happen next. But that's as it may be. I forgot what I want now. CBS All Access, which later became Paramount Plus, began flooding its service with piles of new Star Trek shows. Piles. Some good, some bad. And the franchise was officially headed in a new direction. Yes, there is some good Kurtzman Star Trek out there. I'm a big fan of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I'd make no bones about that. I do enjoy it, even though I do realise it does have its problems. I still don't think it's in the original series continuity. I think it's a totally separate universe in my mind, even though they keep telling us it is, but it obviously isn't. It obviously isn't. It's some have described it. I remember when Discovery first came out, and even I fell for this. They said it's a visual reboot, even though they said the events in the stories all happen in the original series continuity, but it's a visual reboot to bring it up to date, which is why it looks so different. But even then, they just change stuff in canon, and they still do that in Strange New Worlds. I'm waffling, I know, but I'm a big fan of Strange New Worlds. Lower Decks, I think, is the best of the Kurtzman era Star Treks, even though originally I hated it. I hated it originally, and then I was cajoled into carrying on watching it, and actually fell in love with it, particularly the California class starship. I love that ship, but I want one anyway. And what else? And Star Trek Picard season 3 were okay. I thought that were good, but seasons 1 and 2 were terrible. The Star Trek short treks were absolutely diabolically bad. I hate those with a passion. Should never have been made. And what else have we had? Oh, Star Trek Prodigy. Star Trek Prodigy were good. So you could argue that there's been actually more good than bad, but that's just from my personal opinion. There are some out there that just hate all of Kurtzman Trek or new Trek. Just whatever, even they just won't cut it any slack or won't give any quarter. It's just all terrible. But I do see good and bad in everything. There is some bad. When it is bad, it is absolutely terrible. When it is good, it's actually really enjoyable stuff to watch. Anyway, where were we? In that environment, the future of Star Trek movies wasn't just in flux, but seemingly vanishing into a gravitational vortex. Various Star Trek 4 movie ideas have been floated over the years, and some were wild. Quentin Tarantino was said to be working on a script. That would have been awful. He wanted to do essentially a sequel, I think it was a sequel, to the original series episode, A Piece of the Action. The one with the planet of gangsters. A ship left a book behind about gangsters of Chicago in the 1920s, and they built their whole society around that book. Not a great episode, to be completely honest, but Quentin Tarantino must love it, and he wanted to do a film all about that. It'd have been awful. I know Quentin Tarantino's a big Star Trek fan, and he even has Star Trek quotes in his films. At the beginning of Kill Bill, there was the "Revenge is a dish best served cold," and it says old Klingon proverb underneath. I think it is actually a Japanese proverb, isn't it? Is it either Japanese or Chinese? I'm not sure which, but the Klingons usurped it, didn't they? Anywho, S.J. Clarkson was attached to direct at one point, as was Noah Hawley, who's now doing Alien Earth. S.J. Clarkson, a British, I didn't know she was British, film director. She did Madam Web. She'd done some Game of Thrones stuff, or she was supposed to, but I think it got canned, didn't it? Yeah, and the only movie is Madam Web. The notoriously bad Madam Web. I kind of enjoyed it, but as I said, I cut films a lot of slack. Even if the stories are terrible, the acting's terrible, sometimes you just can't stop watching, can you? And you can get some enjoyment out of a bad movie. But anyway, that's S.J. Clarkson, and so there we go. And Noah Hawley is going on to, he's gone on to produce the Alien Earth series, which starts very soon on Fox in America, or whatever channel it's on in America. Maybe Hulu, I don't know, but it's on Disney Plus over in the UK. Looking forward to that. I hope it's not poo. It looks good from the trailers. Let's hope it's not poo. Well, I also did Fargo, the TV show, didn't it? And he's done other stuff as well. A few years ago, it was announced that Paramount was working on a Star Trek prequel film, even though Star Trek has already had multiple prequels. Too many, really, to be honest. Some could argue. My favourite Star Trek series is Enterprise, and that was a prequel. So, don't knock all prequels, some are good. Depends how they're done. Anyway, working on a Star Trek prequel film, even though Star Trek has already had multiple prequels, the prequel, as far as we know, is still on the docket, but it's a separate project from a fourth Kelvin movie, which is still in the, we intend to get to that eventually phase. Simon Pegg, who played Scotty in the 3 Kelvin movies and who co-wrote Star Trek Beyond, probably why it's the better of the 3 JJ verse films, still thinks a Star Trek 4 is possible. He talked about the possibilities at a recent Star Trek convention via Collider, and he even thought of a way to make a new movie function as a drama. In short, he thinks filmmakers should lean into the fact that everyone is a decade older. Simon Pegg thinks that door is still open for a Star Trek 4. And there he is in Star Trek 4 with the lovely Sophia Boutella as Jayla. One of the best parts of that film, to be completely honest. She was great in that. To remind readers, Paramount recently achieved a controversial merger with Skydance, and that has led to new speculations, positive and negative, about the future of Star Trek. The merger is causing a massive restructuring, and David Ellison has gone on to say that they're going to focus on producing quality movies and shows and stuff like that, haven't they? But we'll see what happens. And there is that controversial memo that they're going to move away from wokeness, DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion, and stuff like that, because that pushes away, that drives away viewers, and there's nothing worse than driving away viewers, because if you drive away viewers, you drive away advertisers. If it's TV, if it's movies, you drive away ticket buyers. The merger has caused massive restructuring, and no one knows if Star Trek will thrive or wither in the new environment. Pegg, however, feels that the door has reopened. The new CEO of the company, David Ellison, is said to be a Trekkie, or is he a Trekker? Remember that? That used to be a thing, didn't it? Back in the, late 80s, early 90s. The Trekkie versus Trekker. A Trekkie was like a casual fan of Star Trek, whereas a Trekker was a die-hard fan and knew all the ins and outs and knew that deuterium was the fuel that powered starships, and not dilithium crystals, which were just used to focus the energy into the warp matrix or whatever. What does that make me? Don't know. But anyway, that was a thing back then, wasn't it? And will likely keep certain TV shows and movie projects thrumming like a warp engine. This could mean potentially a more active development of Star Trek 4. Everyone, including Pegg, likes the cast of those movies, and bringing the series to a head would feel appropriate. Sure, the Prime timeline has been reactivated, and actor Anton Yelchin, who played Pavel Chekhov in the Kelvin movies, died in 2016, but Pegg feels that it can work. Indeed, he would like to see Star Trek 4 catch up with the characters after they too have spent a decade apart. Before we carry on, Anton Yelchin, if they do a Star Trek 4, recast Chekhov. Don't say that Chekhov died. Recast Chekhov. Get somebody else in to play Chekhov. I don't think Anton Yelchin would want the role to pass away as he did. Actors want their characters to live on, don't they? So I think they should recast Chekhov. Obviously, do a nod to Anton and his sad passing, but recast Chekhov. Anyway, in his words, not Chekhov's, Simon Pegg, Ellison is a big Star Trek fan who cares about the series. I love those guys, and despite how we had a tragedy in our group, which was extremely painful, it would be wonderful to come together again. JJ has always said that there are scripts being developed and this and that. JJ says a lot of things. He's a bloody con man, he is. I think it's about time. It would be great to see us 10 years after the 5-year mission where we are. 10 years after the 5-year mission, not only is that smart, but it's worked before. That was the premise of the original Star Trek feature films back in the 70s and 80s. Specifically, that was the approach of Robert Wiser's 1979 classic Star Trek the Motion Picture. As I said, that was only like 2 years or so after the end of the 5-year mission. And that's a view of the refit Enterprise bridge from Star Trek the Motion Picture with their terrible uniforms, all beige and stuff. They were awful. Much better when we got to Star Trek 2, even though Gene Roddenberry hated those. The original Star Trek series went off the air in 1969 after suffering low ratings throughout its 3-series run. Can't blame the series though, can you? Because it was the studios, not studios, the networks. They just kept putting it on like at 10 o'clock at night on a Friday night when everybody's out having fun, stuff like that. The Death Slot. Anyway, it wouldn't be until the early 1970s that Star Trek would gain an audience, remaining on the air through incessant reruns. Yes, because it went into syndication. Star Trek conventions began to form, and Star Trek grew into a cultural phenomenon. By the late 1970s, interest in the show had grown to the point where a reboot was feasible. Don't forget we had the animated series in the early 70s as well, which were cool. Show creator Gene Roddenberry initially wanted to make a new TV series, Star Trek Phase 2, and they did actually start producing that, essentially. It went into pre-production. The casts were made. We had Ilea were going to be in Star Trek Phase 2. Zon were going to be the replacement for Spock. But they end up decided that they wanted to do a movie. But that mutated in the decidedly not boring Star Trek the Motion Picture. At the time, for me, when I went to see it, I was 12 when I went to see it. Took my younger nephew with me to go see it, and all he did, I kind of didn't enjoy it because all he did all through the film was just talk to the kid behind and tell him how his Uncle Steve could beat up his dad. I was 12. Anyway, where were we? So I wasn't a big fan of Star Trek the Motion Picture as a kid, but as I've grown older, obviously I've come to love the film. It is one of the best of the Star Trek movies, probably the most Star Trek of the Star Trek movies, to be completely honest. It's an amazing film, particularly the 4K release. I'm not one of these that bangs on about 4K, because quite more often than not, I can't tell any difference between 4K and the regular Blu-ray, because I've got old eyes. But the Star Trek the Motion, I can't say it. The Star Trek the Motion Picture 4K Blu-ray is astonishingly good. Because it had been a decade since Trekkies saw the characters together, a large portion of motion picture was a catch-up. The characters had mostly drifted apart and followed independent career paths. Kirk William Shatner, why is it going on about this for? Now an admiral was no longer in command of the USS Enterprise. Nearly the first half of the movie is devoted to the characters reintroducing themselves and displaying that yes, they are all indeed a decade older and wiser. They had all received promotions and their attitudes had changed. The age of the characters even became a plot point in 1982 Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan, a film that saw Kirk wearing glasses because of his ageing eyeballs and also because he's allergic to Retnax 5, which I presume is some drug that you would give to make your eyesight perfect. Why can't we have that now? But anyway. That, Pegg seems to think, would be a great approach to Star Trek 4 as well. It's been a long time since Star Trek Beyond and the characters have likely moved on from their previous 5-year mission. It would be possible to reunite them now in their 40s and 50s with an open acknowledgement of their age. Time will tell if a Star Trek 4 or any other Star Trek movies are actually made, but Pegg's idea is sound, and there we go, that's the end of that. Yes, it is, but I still don't want to see it. I don't want to see another JJ verse Star Trek movie. To be completely honest, unless it is amazingly good and the move away from the JJ, could you say, gloss? Because he's a JJ Abrams is a competent filmmaker and his films always look good, but I don't know, the kind of lack verisimilitude, they lack believability. And plus, he doesn't care about the science part of science fiction. Star Trek is essentially science fiction, more so than Star Wars is science fantasy. Star Trek has always been more science fiction, even though there are fantasy elements. But they try to explain what's going on in scientific terms, even if it all is just made-up techno-babble. He doesn't care about that. He does J.J. Abrams, and he kind of spoils it all. But we will see what happens, won't we? With Skydance taking over Paramount, we'll see what happens. And if David Ellison is truly a Trekkie, he will sort it out. Hopefully, he's not. But remember, he did bring us the JJ verse. Did Skydance? They brought us the JJ verse. So I'm not building my hopes up, to be completely honest. But maybe he'll sack Alex Kurtzman and bring JJ back to do the TV Star Treks. Ooh, that'd be awful. Because apparently, even though they did work together before on the original Star Treks, not the original Star Trek, on the 2009, on the JJ-verse Star Trek movies, Kurtzman and Roberto Orci, and the late Roberto Orci, and J.J. Abrams. Apparently they hate each other now, apparently. But he's still an alumnus of the J.J. Abrams school of cinematic buffoonery. But anyway, that's by the by. Right, so we'll leave that there. I don't care if it'll happen or not, to be honest. But Simon Pegg thinks there's a chance. We'll see, won't we? I'm waiting to hear. I want things to start happening in Star Trek, and I want us to know what's going. I don't want Star Trek. I want Star Trek Starfleet Academy to not get a season 2, even though season 1 hasn't come out yet. They're supposed to start filming season 2 in this month in August. But we'll see if that happens, won't we? Because there's all these rumours that season 2's been cancelled, but there's nothing definite. Nobody really knows. Well, somebody knows, but they're not telling us yet. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. So we'll leave it there. So thanks for watching, wherever you are. Look after each other. And until next time, I'll say they. That old Yorkshire geek with stories